Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fourth discussion of The Darkness That Comes Before. Today, we discuss the part of the book that tells us why the book was named what it is. Uh, with me, I have our usual group of friends. Carl, would you like to start us off with introductions?
Yeah, excuse me. My name is Carl D. Albert. I am an author of epic fantasy and a member of the Page Chewing Forum, and I'm happy to be here.
Nice.
Dan?
Am I the next order? Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
you can just go
Yeah.
clockwise. Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, my name's Dan. I've read the books a couple of times before, and I'm vaguely rereading them now just to remember exactly what's in each part. But yeah, I'm excited to hear what you guys think.
Nice. And Mike.
Yeah, I'm Mike, and I'm also a member of the Page Chewing Forum, and it's my first time reading the book and the series.
And I'm Steve. I'm also a member of the Page Chewing Forums, and it's my third
The
time
god
reading this book.
of page chewing.
No, no, not quite. But it's my third time reading it. I'm still picking up new things that I missed the first two times.
Oh, speaking of picking up things, I think it was Eric had a comment about our reading of the epigraphs last time. Whether you picked something up during the poem that Carl had read to us. Maybe just a yes or no answer for Eric.
I'll have to look into that comment while you're.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll look into that.
Cool. So
What
what
are
did
we going to
everyone
talk about? What? I'm sorry. What was it? What is it? Is it spoilery?
I mean, it was just a
Or
question about whether Steve's ears perked up because his did. But
Do you
Okay,
have
yeah,
the epigraph there to read, or
it's
do you know which?
yeah, I think I know which one. Let me see. I think it was wait. It's
I have the
better if
memory of a mouse, so I don't remember what it was I
it
read.
was probably the one on page 273. Let me double check. Wait, no, that's not a poem. Which one did we read? Then 254.
Yeah, so did Myers perked up during Dan's epigraph reading?
Yes. I think he meant Carl because Dan wasn't here last time. But
Nope.
Yeah, I'll check into that. And I'll re-listen.
yeah. It's the epigraph for chapter 9, Dan.
Okay. Well, now I need to find it. Okay. Yeah. I'll look it up.
Yeah. So, what did everyone think of this time's part for reading? I loved it. I didn't think it would be easy to beat what we read last time, but we met a new character who might be almost as much as maybe not. Like I'm reserving judgment, and I really loved the discussion on the meaning of the darkness that comes before. That was awesome.
Yeah, there was a lot of really great stuff. I would confess to struggling with Surwa's storyline a lot. I just found it extremely bleak. And amidst everything that had happened, and to be honest, it felt to me not exactly repetitive, but a little bit repetitive of the stories we've already been seeing with Esmonet.
Yeah.
So yeah, if I had a big criticism about this section, I would say it was that it felt like it was exploring sort of similar themes, but from an even more bleak character who has even less agency. And so I found all of that stuff just really hard to read, to be honest. But that said, I'm certainly not someone who's going to like go around and be like, oh, I think, Bakker is like a misogynist or something for including, a story based around like sexual violence and patriarchal control and that sort of thing. It's there for a reason. It's meant to be horrifying. And it was, he very much succeeded in that. Just like, it's a tough story. But beyond that, I really found it quite compelling. Yeah, the discussion around the darkness that comes before. We got Kellis. We'd been wondering when he was going to come in. Good to know he's definitely not made the net. And then, also seeing more of Nair in a way I didn't expect. I definitely want to kind of talk about his character, which we can start now. But I guess we're doing general thoughts. So, general thoughts. Also, I don't know who's typing, but someone's typing is really loud.
Sorry. My mechanical keyboard. I was trying to find the chapter with the quote, and I was also trying to find I think there was a quote from Bakker saying how he chose his female characters based on three archetypes. And I think he said the whore, the waif, Waif. I don't know how it's pronounced.
Waif,
I've only seen it read, Waif, and the Harridan. So,
so there's a third one coming.
Yeah. But if it was like a very deliberate choice, and there's like a whole. I read both what he said about the role of women in his world and misogyny and all this sort of stuff. There's a lot of stuff he said, and there's also, I think I read there's also a good article someone published about sort of summarizing what he said and what other people have said and discussing it. But I don't remember who wrote it, but I might find it later on if I have time. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of discussion on that if you are interested in reading it later, maybe at the end of a trilogy or the end of all of it.
Definitely want to let the story play out before I go diving in there. But I definitely would be interested to see what his intent was. I always think it's interesting to see in an author's own words kind of what they were trying to do. I mean, certainly I'm biased, I guess, about that. But I like hearing what writers have to say about their writing. And I think he's a very obviously intelligent guy. So I know everything he's doing is very deliberate.
Yeah. But it is like you said, it is something that turns off a lot of people. The role of women in this world is very bleak, like you said.
Yeah. Surwa especially, again, because just like Esmenet, I felt like actually had some agency. Like she definitely was victimized a lot, but it felt like she relatively, took control of her life. And that's part of the thing that made what happened with her and the whatever it was that debatably assaulted her. So gripping and horrifying was that it was like suddenly subverting kind of her own sexual control and her own sexual agency. But with, Surwa here, it's just like all she's ever known is violence and no control. And, she was sold as a girl. She had that brief, moment of, not moment, but like years of happiness and then just horror nonstop. And she latches onto Kellis, which is interesting. And I definitely do not read, I'm curious what you guys think, but I do not read Kellis as being truly altruistic or genuinely tender with her. I think, just having like been in his perspective in the prologue, I think he's just fully manipulating her and is very knowingly, kind of stringing her along for his own uses.
Which is interesting because like, what use would Kellis put her do? I'm curious. Like I can't think of what. Right now, she's probably weighing them down. But I desperately wanted a Kellis perspective. Like we saw how he was trying to manipulate Nair and somewhat failing, but largely succeeding. But with what's her name, Survey. I would have loved to see what Kellis is trying to do because there are parts that make me think, oh, he genuinely cares for her. But then there's other parts, like the last bit, I think towards the end of the chapter, where he's almost this like godlike person and it's almost clear that he's manipulated her into thinking that he's a god, or it feels like that. And if that's his goal, if that's a happy side effect for him, I'm interested to see where that goes. But if he did that deliberately, why? So that's a very interesting thread, I think.
I wondered that too, because it's like a lot of his actions, I can't wrap my head around why he would be doing it other than compassion. But we've also seen him do this sort of thing before. And I mean, I guess it helps maybe to have another tool, you could say, to offset Nair, who is so, he definitely influences Nair, but like you said, he's not 100% successful like he is with Surway, who's just, I mean, she is drinking the Kool-Aid 100%.
But
I'm
Selway
curious,
doesn't have any power, right? So
right?
why does he need her, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the
It's
thing.
interesting. Mike, I'm curious what your thoughts are.
I realized I was on mute. So I like Varsha. I really enjoyed the kind of change of tone of this part. I particularly I agree with you though, Carl, about Sarway and the fact that she definitely she has a troubled past, and I'm very curious about their relationship. I have many questions. I might hold off for now about her relationship, but I kind of I had written down that it seemed like insta love, instant falling in love, which I was just like that. Yeah, something. But she anyway. I won't go into it, but I definitely noted that. So I had questions about um, and also
Well,
questions
go into
about
it.
how
We're talking
he
about it.
supposedly
Yeah.
is having his baby, and yet they have not had sex apparently. But maybe I misinterpreted that. And then one other theme I just want to mention quickly is there's just a lot of father son stuff throughout. It just comes up over and over again, and I think there's a lot more. There's also more to this whole where we want to kill this man. I don't think it's just about killing Moengus. I think there's a lot more to unpack there, potentially,
Yeah.
but that we just don't know about. Oh, sorry. One
Father.
other thing is we also heard not just the darkness that comes before, but there was also mention of the Prince of Nothing. So it's like,
That's right.
I don't know if you're supposed to get excited when you're like, oh, I mean, that's something you should, obviously you're going to catch. So
We used to
What are we? Some kind of Prince of Nothing?
we used,
Hey,
we used to do that with Indian movies a lot. They'd have these vague, interesting titles, and then when it comes on the screen or someone says it, we're like, oh, the title, just for no
Yeah.
other reason than that it's showing up.
yeah. And the actor looks at the camera and
Mhm.
winks to you. It feels like that sometimes.
Yeah. So again,
I
sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I want to talk more about the father son stuff that Mike touched on, because that was something I noticed particularly too here, and I noticed it in the context of that I've definitely felt like there was some weird. I wish I could remember the specific section. This is the problem when I don't take notes. That there were some like interesting kind of Abrahamic like Yahweh Jesus vibes with Moingus and Kellis, and like a part of me was like it made me wonder about where their story in particular is going. Like there was this particular I, I want to say it was just something. Maybe it was about Surway and how she viewed
oh yeah,
Kellis, and like the coming of this like prophet almost, and that there was this like like he was like the second coming, like he was the father. Or no, I actually think it maybe was Nair and the way Nair was thinking about Kellis, where like they were almost the same person. Like when he first sees Kellis, he like mistakes him for Moingus, and there was this just like I remember something in the wording of one of the passages made me just think really distinctly that like there was this weird kind of dark, flipped over take on sort of the classic like Christian God Jesus, aspects in Moingus and Kellis that I thought was like an interesting parallel. And it's definitely something I'm going to keep my eye on going forward. Their whole dynamic, I'm curious to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I guess also the obviously topic, like if we think the Sir we're thinking she's got Callus's baby, there would be some sort of I'm not gonna say virgin birth, but there's some sort of parallels there, right?
Yeah.
If they haven't had sex or anything, so which is also similar. But like you said too, like the father and the son, or like the son following the footsteps of the father, it's very, very Old Testament, or like you said, Abrahamic religions.
Definitely.
It feels like that. But I think there's going to be more exploration of these topics, I think, and family relationship, right, Steve? Especially in the second trilogy, the second series.
You can say that, yeah.
Well, that is a tease. Okay.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, and there's also going to be more. I think there's going to be more callbacks and parallels you're going to see to Abrahamic religion going forward.
Okay. So, Varsha, what were you going to say?
Go ahead.
I forgot. So-
Yeah.
That's fine. I'll probably remember it again if it's important. But I could start a new topic if that's okay. So I was curious.
I did want to ask, I guess, sorry, before we go ahead, since we're talking about Nair and Moengus, or Nair and Callus, what do you guys think? What do you guys think Nair feels like? What's his relationship with Moengus and Nair?
Okay, I'm excited that you brought this up because this was the thing that stood out to me, and I did not expect it all. Nair is totally queer, and he is 100% into Moengus. I don't think they did anything. I think Moengus knowingly manipulated him. But in chapter, what's the first chapter of this? There's like repeated phallic imagery, and he dreams of the worm coming out, and he has like it's this constant, like it is everywhere, and I could not believe it because I thought it was just like gossip, among the tribes people. And that's like kind of how Nair first reacted. He was like, oh, he thought we slept together. And it was like, oh yeah, no, obviously that wasn't what was going on there. But the way he thinks he's like clearly not aware of it, and he feels angry about it. Like he's so angry about these feelings. But to me, it's like such a clear physical attraction he feels to Moengus and then to Kellis. And he just doesn't know how to process it. And it's so weird because he's like, he's got the classic barbarian, like uber macho vibes, and it's just not a place I expected a character like that to go at all. It really surprised me and delighted me because it was just so, unexpected. I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff to explore with a culture like the Skilvendi and Nair having potentially same-sex attraction.
Yeah, I mean, he does have wives, though, right?
I think he's like, he's on a spectrum here, right? Like, I think clearly first of all, wouldn't be the first time that a gay man, married and had sex with women and procreated to cover for the fact. But no, I do get the vibe that he's probably into women sexually. I just think he also, at the very least, Moengus, he was feeling a little stirring of the loins, you could say.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff is sexual in these books, to be honest.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of exploration on how, like, the dynamic between sex and power, right? Is it about sex? Is it about power? Right? Is it attraction? Is it domination? What is it, right?
Absolutely. No, exactly. It's a huge theme in the book, and in hindsight, I should have seen it coming. But I'm curious what the other new readers' thoughts are on this.
I can't say that I read his anger about his interactions with Moengus as being about his sexual identity. I think it's more about how he was manipulated by Moengus into murdering his father. I
Mhm.
think the actions he took played a lot more into his anger than about his his relationship with Moengus is something to be angry at, but it's because of like what he ended up doing as a consequence is how I read his anger. Not necessarily maybe the sexual identity bit is a part of it, but I felt like it was about a lot more than that. But
Oh,
um
I agree, and my argument would be is that it's all wrapped up in that,
mm,
and that part of the reason he was even manipulated was because of this attraction he felt that he didn't know how to handle or deal with or label, and that's part of his anger. Certainly, it is tied into the fact that like it led to his father getting, you know, killed, and him then getting this like, you know, metaphorical black mark on him.
mm. But like I mean attraction, yes, but also isn't there some element of uh manipulation there? Moengus, sure, maybe he used attraction to manipulate him, but if again, like he praised him, called him an intellectual, told him he's different from the rest of the Sylvendi, which like who wouldn't be attracted to that? Um, there was a lot of manipulative elements, I thought, in their relationship.
Right. What I'm saying is, I think it's all wrapped up together. Is I think it's all related,
Mm,
and that
makes
it's like
sense.
he essentially Moingus was like effectively
Yep.
grooming uh, Nair, and that yeah, that is absolutely part of what like he's angry about, and that it's just his own feelings about like that he can't express or understand are wrapped up in that too.
Mm,
But no, I agree. Yeah, it's totally about the manipulation, like in that he was effectively used by this guy, and he's aware of that, and he doesn't like feeling impotent, and it made him feel impotent.
How old was Nair when that happened? I don't remember.
He's
Was
like
he like a
16.
teenager? Okay.
Yeah, he's a
He's 16.
teenager, I think. One of the things from I think this is chapter 12. I absolutely have to write down notes, so otherwise I won't remember. But I did notice that, which was really interesting, is that the mother, if I recall this correctly, gave birth to a blonde child. So that means that Moangus was also like, I mean, we don't know enough about if this was another one of those immaculate births or what have you. But which I had thought, I for some reason I immediately thought of that. But also like, I thought that description of how it seemed Nair kind of learned that he was able to learn that he was being manipulated. He was able to kind of use that to kind of in the next chapter when he's with Kellis to kind of defend himself against his manipulation. So I learned that Nair is way more is very intelligent. And that was a new side I think that we had not really seen. And I think there's a section where Kellis even says, or maybe he thinks that he's able to avoid my abilities or my, because there is a section, there's mention of being seduced by Moangus when he was younger, and that his thoughts were not his own. So whatever he was thinking, I kind of question that, because I just, there's a lot of cases where I'm just not really convinced about, I don't know if that's unreliable narrator or what, but I'm not totally convinced about what is on the page is really what's going on quite a lot in this book, which I like. Yeah.
Yeah, the characters are definitely unreliable. I totally agree with that. What they think is not necessarily what is real or what is true. I mean, this whole thing is about perspective in a big
Mhm.
way and identity. This book. Um,
But do you think it's a on purpose unreliable narrator, or more like, sometimes it's people, you interpret things in different ways, or you don't admit to yourself, or you just, right?
Yeah,
Or you don't know how you're feeling, right? Or why you're feeling the way you are.
yeah, I think it's more like character perspectives that,
Right.
who we are getting the information from, and then we have to assemble it and get the various points of view. That's why I really want a Kellis point of view for the relationship with Surrey because I want to see, like, I don't know, I want to see if there's any, for lack of a better word, human element to him, um, which, based on what he told us about the darkness that comes before, there probably isn't.
Right. And even there was this, he even says something like the only thing that matters is mission. That's I was
Mm,
like, well, you're kind of, but I don't. He's kind of a young guy. He's kind of naive too, I think, because he hasn't been out in the world. So maybe, who knows?
yeah.
He's gonna change. I assume.
He
Otherwise, he'll be kind of boring character.
he did have one moment of humanity, I guess. Was it when Nayur, was it Nayur who was taking advantage of all the women that they found? Like Survey was one of them, and there was a note about how he felt outraged, like he was observing something that was foreign to him, and it was outrage that he was feeling. I'll try and find the quote because I'm probably misquoting it, but I thought that was interesting because that feels like he's developing some thoughts that he's not like strictly manipulating and like creating himself, or have full, that he strictly does not have full control over. But yeah, it might take me a bit to get there, so we can keep talking.
But what do you guys think of what he said, like the darkness? Do you guys, what do you think of that part? Like that, what it means. Does it resonate with you? Do you think he has some sort of, he's saying some sort of truth, or is he just bullshit?
Can we read the passage? Does someone have the passage pulled up?
I have the section where they talk about the logos. I don't know if that's the same. Is that the same thing?
I think it is, yeah. I think page 357 and 358
Yep.
in this copy of the book.
Oh,
Or chapter, I don't know, 11? What is it? 12.
the Dunyan have surrendered themselves to logos, to what you would call reason and intellect. They seek absolute awareness, the self-moving thought. I don't want to read the whole part.
Self-moving.
Maybe there's another part before that. Do we believe
No,
it?
I think that's the bit. Yeah.
It's their dogma or whatever.
Yeah, the thoughts of all men arise from the darkness. If you are the movement of your soul, and the cause of that movement precedes you, then how can you ever call your thoughts your own? How can you be anything other than slave to the darkness that comes before? Only the logos allows one to mitigate that slavery, right? Only knowing the sources of thought and action allows us to own our thoughts and actions, to throw off the yoke of circumstance, right? It's a lot of, like you can do it. There's like philosopher that has spent their whole life thinking about this, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to unpack there. I mean, does it ring true? I definitely think, at least in part, the idea that things, ideas, thoughts, direct us, that a lot, most of us are not immediately aware of or consciously aware of, whether it's, things we've experienced, or, just all the ideas that have been shared over time that gradually reach and influence us. Or even if it's something as deep as, like, we know generational trauma is a thing, and that, the DNA remembers. And so I definitely think that there's some truth to the idea that, like, you almost need to be aware. I mean, that's like a common, like, therapy tactic, right? Is like, trying to unpack where your reaction comes from, your unhealthy, coping mechanism, your whatever, what the seat of origin of that is. And I think that's kind of, a related idea, or if not exactly what he's talking about here, that, to really be able to master your emotions and your motives and your, approach to life, you have to understand where it's all coming from. And it's such a big idea, right? Because like even just saying that like doesn't like quite grasp the totality of it, but it definitely rang true to me, in terms of just like the subconscious and kind of ideas of the collective, unconscious, and how we're all influenced by things just beyond our control.
Maybe we would not all go to the same conclusion that only through reason and intellect you can dominate that, but
I also
I don't know, that's definitely the part that I would have to think a lot more about and really have a lot of conversations about, because that's I mean, I don't know, Kellis is an interesting character, right? And certainly the way he manipulates people to me is so potent that it's almost magical. And he's clearly there to like put forth a philosophical idea, right? He's put forth to like explore, the ideas presented in the logos, but it's just also something that's so extreme that I'm like, this could never be real. Like no one could actually function like this and manipulate people this well. Certainly there are people who are really good at manipulating others, but like he is so profoundly competent at it that it's a fantasy story. So like I'm on board with it. I enjoy it. I like it. I like watching him do it, in like a messed up, kind of vaguely macabre way. But it's definitely something that like, he almost embodies this idea. And certainly the Dunyain in general do. But yeah, sorry, Mike, I think you were going to say something.
no, yes, but one of the things I keep thinking about is these were probably more collectivist societies, so I have a little bit of a challenge with this being imposed on. Is he talking about the individual? Because in most of the world, decision making is not so individual based. It's done more in as a kind of collective thing. So it's one of the challenges I have with this. However, I find it very intriguing, and so I agree with what he's saying. I think it's more of it's a very modern concept that is being applied to something that this is a secondary world. So I don't medieval, or I'm not sure. I'm not a history buff, but it's there's so much that takes place in cultures, whether they're norms or be it gender norms or what have you, that dictate how people behave and decision making.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a great question, Dan, and I feel like I need to keep rereading this section. I'm glad I bookmarked it because it's probably going to come up over and over again.
Probably. I think in this case, though, it's a bit more like deep than cultural. It's more like personal, right? It's like your own thoughts. Where do they come from, right? I think that's it. But yeah, like a lot of the stuff he says, like you read it and you're like, wait a second, and then you read it again and it's like, wait a second, what is he trying to say? What does this mean? There's
so
a lot of yeah.
I agree with you, Dan. I do think it goes beyond that, but I do think the cultural aspect is part of it, because I think the cultural aspect, like fundamentally, like Mike was saying, helps shape perspective and helps then therefore shape decision making, right, and thoughts and ideas. Yeah, and so I think that I think they're all tied together. Is sort of. In the same way we were talking, the sort of resentment that Nair feels, I think there's like a lot going on here. It's not just one thing, which, kudos to Bakker that like clearly, one, he's thought about this a lot. I mean, he knows philosophy, right? He's like a philosophy PhD, or at the very least he was getting one. I don't know if he completed it or not.
Yeah, we got it. Who knows?
But he's clearly a very smart guy and is writing a very complex story, very about very complex ideas. It is refreshing to read that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, no, I just meant that I do agree that culture does shape how you think. I think what he's saying is that it doesn't. What he's saying, but that doesn't mean I agree with what he's saying.
Yeah.
Right? That's what he thinks.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
Fair
yeah.
enough. Yeah. It's interesting calling it the darkness too, right?
Right.
Because there's an implication there, right? Like this is clearly using the sort of classic, light dark dichotomy and leaning into the idea that I don't know, there's something insidious, that originates it all. The originator of your thoughts as an individual, that there's some, maybe even before original sin, right? Like that it's just like baked into things, bakered into things, if you will. Yeah, I don't know. It is very interesting.
That the darkness does not reference the first apocalypse. I mean, it was a dumb question.
I don't think so. I think it's like
It's the
a
nothingness.
sort of philosophical idea.
Yeah. I got really excited at that bit because it was very interesting to me. I am very interested, I guess, in questions of consciousness, if you will, and this feels like an exploration of that. And I guess one of the very popular questions in philosophy is like, what is the nature of thought? Where does it originate? And he's got like this general darkness, which always makes me think of like, the void that creates matter, antimatter particles, and thought. But what he said, I feel like there are many, many questions we can ask here. For instance, I think it is implied later on that the sources of thought that Kellis and Moingus and the Dunian in general are apparently not prey to are, things like history and culture and other things that shape people's thoughts generally, right? Like I forget where, but that's implied that these are the things that other people source their thoughts from, but these guys are not prey to. But then they are able to manipulate the people who are prey to these forces. So then how do you manipulate without also being deeply familiar with that? um, or maybe not being influenced by it is not the same as not being familiar with it. And then there is another implication which he calls out pretty explicitly here, where Kellis says sentiments like a son's love for his father simply deliver us to the darkness, make us slaves of custom and appetite. The shining blue eyes held Nair's own impossibly calm. I don't love my father, plainsman. I do not love. If his murder will allow my brethren to pursue their mission, then I will murder him. So it sounds almost like he's saying that um, not being slave to the darkness, whatever that means, whatever that looks like, I don't understand yet, but means that he's basically an emotionless person, right? Which, I don't know, I was trying to figure out, I thought one of sociopath or psychopath was the people who can manipulate others without really
Sociopath?
sociopath, right?
I think so.
Yeah, who can that sounds like that Kellis might be one of those, maybe.
It's the lack of empathy is like one of the diagnostic things.
Mm.
It's the manipulation may come as like a part of it, but it's the inability to like empathize.
Mm.
Certainly Kellis. I mean, that's why I read his interaction with Surway as
Oh yeah.
Malignant. That's not the right word. Malevolent. Is that like he just doesn't, when we were in his head, he doesn't seem to feel empathy.
Mm.
Like, or if he does, it is extremely muted. That he is part of his whole Dunyan, logos philosophy is he's managed to like cage that human part of himself. And it's very interesting. It also means I do not trust him at all.
Yeah.
I mean, who do you
But he's
trust?
a very intriguing character.
Do you trust Nair?
I would not trust Nair either. I think I would trust a Camian. Honestly, I feel like a Camian's pretty loyal, all things considered. As far as spies go, I think he's probably pretty loyal. Esmanet,
Hmm.
if depending, I certainly
Not compass.
no, no, not confidence at all. No, no, sir. Steve, I want to hear from you. What are some of the things you highlighted? We haven't heard from you in like all these 40 minutes.
No, I'm soaking up the conversation. I love the back and forth between Nair and Kellis, and Kellis trying to find a way to manipulate Nair, and then thinking to himself, well, like my father also used the same method. Like this is the same path he used. I think that was interesting. I have lots of notes on this section, but lots about deception and truth. A couple of the quotes is on 362. Nothing deceived so well as the truth. I thought that was great. And
Really great quote.
there was something that when he met Serway, there was on 383. He says something that I caught. Something is happening to me, Father. That after he sees her, so whatever kind of connection they have, and why she feels so close to him when they haven't coupled, at least according to him. And I think him being Dunyain he has a charisma, so she might be drawn to him because he's the only thing that in this world of just terror and desperation, he's like the only somewhat safe place or safe thing in her life at this point. So I guess it makes sense that she would be drawn to him, even if he's not going out of his way to comfort her.
Definitely.
But yeah, I think all of you mentioned earlier about Serway, the parallels between Serway and Espinet and their views on things, because Serway, she's really set on justice. There was a line on 394. She would have dignity, or she would die hating. I thought that was great. So the contrast between those two characters, I think, is interesting. But yeah, a couple other. I wanted to ask everyone what they thought about the way that Kellis and Nair met, and if you knew that was Kellis when Nair found the bodies and found Kellis there.
I definitely immediately thought it was him. I mean, all the dead srunk. I was like, "Oh, this is him. This is our guy." Okay. I was just like, who else is gonna like kill a bunch of the orcs? It's Kellis. I will say, I think it on that note, it is. I can't decide if I just think it's like insanely awesome or almost like comical every time someone watches Kellis and there's like, oh, this guy's screwed. He's done. Like he's in an impossible scenario, with some bad guys. And then Kellis like always comes out on top. Like he is unstoppable, a true force of nature. It's pretty crazy. I remember distinctly when they're on the horses and they're approaching the Imperial troops, and it was just like, oh god, Kellis is done. Like he's about to get taken out, and then he just like wipes the guys out.
To respond to your question, Steve, I didn't really. I don't know if I realized that was him, but I maybe thought it was him. I have to say, I thought it was a little bit anticlimactic in a way, because we had all these theories of who he might be, that he was like we thought he might be somebody else, or we had already met him. I got the sense that we had already met him, and I made the mistake of reading the back of the book, and it said something like that. I know it's a no-no.
Which I'm kind of
I mean,
mad at, by the way. This happens like 3/4 of the way into the book. Why is that in the summary? Why?
it was kind of.
I don't even know what you guys are talking about. What is this? Is this something that's already happened? Can we talk about this?
Well,
Yeah.
Am I going to be spoiled?
Only thing that I remembered, and I haven't gone back to it, is something about like Kellis is traveling with them. So I just assumed he was already.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't recall exactly what the words were, but no, but really, no, it was. I think we were poised and ready to see him again. We talked about it the last time. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was great to. I just really enjoyed, frankly, the especially the last two chapters, because he's such an intriguing, weird character. And the one thing I want to comment on, and I think it was related to what you were saying, Carl, is I feel that Kellis is kind of like a cult figure.
Mm-hmm.
I know you used the word grooming, and I also felt that, but I feel like he has the potential. He can do much more than just influence a few people. You know what I mean? I feel like he has this potential to be like, and the phrase that they used, shucks, is it the one that was chosen or something like that? It's mentioned a couple times, especially in that last chapter. Very much like he's some kind of, new messianic figure, if I pronounce that correctly. Anywho,
Yeah. I think
go ahead.
I think what you're talking about is the exact same like section that made me like really think of the Abrahamic, father and son vibes. That there definitely was like very clear like prophet, chosen one sort of, holy figure imagery or like verbiage around Kellis. But obviously with the underpinning that like he's not a truly pure-hearted figure. Like he has this, sociopathic. I wouldn't even call it a streak because it is like just like how he goes through the world. And that's the question for me right now is like I don't trust him, but I'm like, is he well intentioned at all? Like, does he mean to improve things for people? Like he clearly doesn't care about individuals, but like what are his perspectives about like humanity as a whole? Is he like an ends justify? I mean, he's clearly an ends justify the means guy, but like, are the ends he wants like genuinely, good theoretically, like or debatably good? That's the stuff that I'm really uncertain about right now. At least partially just because we haven't been in his head enough, and we don't really understand exactly what's going on with his father and all of that. What occurred to me as I was kind of rambling about Kellis being impossibly badass was the Dunyain, I guess, are warrior monks. Like clearly he knows how to fight, but like I guess in the prologue that hadn't really settled in for me, but like that's how he learned how to fight, right? Like it was the Dunyain who taught him, right? Presumably, so they must be like kung fu monks,
I think
or
he
am I?
finds a bunch of strength, right, in the beginning, in the prologue or
Yeah,
something like
right.
that, right?
Yeah,
Fights that.
he shows definitely some prowess.
Yeah.
He only gets defeated by like the whatever guy with magic and super powerful,
The non-man,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, the
Which, by the
non-man,
way,
right?
that was the epigraph that I read. So if someone left a
Mhm.
comment about an epigraph, it was that. It was the one on the non-men and how men, like humans, are like, beings of like flesh and love or something like that.
I mean, I have it here. And the non-man king cried words that sting. Now to me you must confess, for death above you hovers. And the emissary answered, ever wary, we are a race of flesh, we are a race of lovers. It says Ballad of the Inkoroi, ancient Kunyiri folk song. I don't know how to pronounce
You
this
must know how to
stuff.
pronounce it because you've read it a few times. No, I'm just kidding.
I don't know. I just see an umlaut and there's a hat on the U. I don't know how to pronounce a hat on a U.
I don't know either. That's a good question. Do we like? There are audiobooks for this,
Yeah,
right?
Yes.
I've been tuning into it periodically here and there.
I'm curious how they pronounce things. Like, do they pronounce things like they're laid out in the glossary? Do they? Totally random side question, but I'm just curious how the narrator. Because sometimes narrator, like the Song of Ice and Fire narrator, like famously mispronounces like all the character names, and so I'm curious, if what it's like for this series.
Well, the only thing that I can say that may or may not align is the main characters, where we have the pronunciation. But yeah, I don't know. It helps. Otherwise, sometimes you can kind of get caught up in how to pronounce something. At least for me.
How do the narrators, or the narrator, I assume it's just one, how does he, I assume, pronounce like any of the, like I mean, whatever you listen to, like the characters you mentioned? I'm sorry to put you on the spot about this. I'm just really curious.
Stairway is how it's pronounced, I believe. Anybody in particular? Is it a Kami?
I assume Kellis is Kellis.
It's a Kamian and not a Kamian.
A Kamian? Okay.
But now I kind of don't love the narrator. I think he sounds kind of... I know some people like him because we've discussed this online in the forum, and that's totally fine. But for me, there was a few times when he was doing a voice, and it wasn't working for me. But that's just me.
I almost want to listen just to hear how he does Nair. Like I just feel like Nair could go wrong so quickly.
It's like he gives him an accent. It's like a Slavic accent or something.
No.
It's a little, it's a little off.
A French accent, that would be funny.
That would be hilarious. I would love that. I would definitely have to get the audiobooks just for that. French Nair. Oh man.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
That would be a fun thing to go through the index of the names at the end and see how everyone pronounces them differently. Because there's some, especially in the future, there's going to be some interesting names which I for sure pronounce wrong. Even here, there's some names which I'm reading again now and trying, oh, wait a second, I'm pronouncing that definitely wrong.
I used to get really caught up on pronunciations. Now I'm just like, yeah, it is what it is. I will Indianize all the pronunciations. It's fine.
I think that's valid. Like at the end of the day, most of these are completely made up. Mm-hmm. So who cares? Pronounce it however you want to. On a similar note, there are repeated mentions of the Yaksh and the white Yaksh or Yaksh, which are like where they live, right? The Skilvendi live. Is that a real thing? I'll admit I just did not look it up, but I was wondering, is this like a type of like hut or tent or something?
I assume it was a yurt. That's what I assumed. But
okay, it's like a yurt. Okay.
But I don't know. I don't know.
I thought it was either a yurt or something like his compound, because he has multiple wives. So it would be not just one dwelling, but the co-wives around him. So okay. like a concession or a compound type of thing.
That was the thing I was struggling with, is I wasn't sure how big to picture it, because maybe they described it. I'm sure he did at some point, at least once, but I did not latch onto that. So I was like, are we talking about like an individual building, like a whole settlement? Like how many buildings? How large should I be picturing this thing? And so I was just curious if any of you had insight, and you did. So thank you.
I was just thinking of mud huts. But also, Yaksh really throws me off every time because it's a thing in Hindu mythology. Like, the word means some sort of little demon or something. How am I supposed to square demon with huts?
I wonder if that's intentional, because I mean, you pointed out earlier, like in part 1, that there were some other words, etymology. So I'm curious if, Bakker clearly cares about etymology. He studied philology. So I'm wondering if that's intentional.
Those other ones sort of made sense. Like the schoolman whose dreams they have, like his name is Sashwat or like Seshwat, which sort of sounds like Sashwat, which means eternal, and that makes sense because like his dreams are eternally living on in the schoolman. And there was one other which I forget now, but that also made sense. This one just doesn't. Like, what what does a heart have to do with demons? Or maybe it does. I don't know. Maybe there's some connection there that I'm missing.
So on first glance, I agree in terms of like, I mean, obviously I don't know the word, so that I can't speak to. But tying the Skilvendi to demons, I think does make sense. And that may be the intention here, right? Because we explicitly found out in this section that they worshipped the no god. That was one of the big reveals that kind of just like snuck on by. Kellis, I don't think, made a huge deal about it, but they were like, their god got killed, they said, or something like that. And that they like clearly were, which was already a thing I was theorizing about. So I was delighted to read that, like, okay, clearly they do have ties to the apocalypse, and like there's weird stuff going on. And the parallels between the Shrank and the Skilvendi are not just like, I'm not just like reading into things. There's something going on there. They're clearly not like allied, like they are scared of the Shrank because the Shrank are like evil alien monster beings. But I don't know. There's stuff going on there, and so maybe that I'm just proposing the idea that maybe I don't know why he would pick just a word for demon, but maybe the idea was to try to like tie the sort of Skilvendi darkness, you could say, to their living arrangement, their whatever it is, tents, settlements, yurts. Yeah,
I suppose that makes sense. I had a follow-up question. So the thing about the no god, did you conclude that based on the fact that their god was dead, or did I completely miss something?
You said like he died like 2,000 years ago. Like, I swear, I mean, am I reading in? I swear they like
No,
all
I'm
but
sure you're right. I just probably missed something. I was just curious what I missed. 2,000 years.
I could be wrong. Like, if I'm wrong, please correct me. But I thought I remembered him distinctly talking to Kellis and talking about how their god died, and it was like at the exact same time the apocalypse happened, and it was there was some other mention of like fighting. He fought the other gods or something. Like, I don't remember it off the top of my head exactly what it was, but
2,155, whatever year that is, year of the Tusk. And
wait, so is the no god a god, or is it the absence of god?
I thought it was is.
How can do they worship the no god? Is it what? No, I'm just trying to figure out how you're interpreting it. This whole
I
situation.
thought the no god was a person. My understanding was the no god was like Sauron or something. It was like this like uber powerful. I mean, we don't know for sure exactly what he was, but like some type of like dark sorcerer who led the Shrank against mankind and presumably probably some of the non-men. I don't know how they tie into things.
So Skilvendi would be some sort of like the Easterlings or the
exactly
variants of Khan, the evil men, the Haradrim or something.
That was my theory, was that they were like that, and that they came out of that camp and somehow had a culture, and then they, in the past like 2,000 years, split off. And then I thought that we all but confirmed that explicitly when we found out that they worship the no god, who I interpreted as like not a philosophical absence of God, but as like an actual. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting question.
I don't know either. No, I know.
Sorry, you're saying the Skilvendi worship the no god? I missed that totally.
I thought there were. I mean, they said their god died.
Maybe that is right. Yeah, I mean, you're.
Yeah.
I totally believe it. I'm missing things here. That's really interesting.
The only reason I latched onto that is because I was already noticing, like, in the word choice, like a thing that continually blows me away is how subtle but intentional Bakker's writing is. Again, like when I'm talking about the sexual feelings, that Nair had for Moingus and, arguably then Kellis, is just because of how much like phallic imagery there was, and like talking about like throbbing, thick things and like stuff like that, where you're reading it, and if you know what you're looking for, it's there. And then, and similarly here, I was actively looking, and and some of it can lead to reading into things, but when it's like repeating itself over and over again, like it was with the Skilvendi and like the apocalyptic Shrank-like imagery, I was like, I was prepared to be, and maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, but that was something I was actively looking for. Similarly now to like Kellis and like the prophet stuff, right? Where there's all of this like prophet imagery around Kellis. And I definitely think he's gonna, and we're going to a holy war. He's gonna start some shit, he's gonna do some religious maneuvering, and no one's gonna realize. I'm sure someone will realize, but most people won't realize that he's manipulating them all. Um,
It's
and
been a
yeah,
commentary on modern religion.
I think,
yeah,
Everything is. I don't know. Invent everything is.
and I think what we're seeing with his relationship with Serway is foreshadowing how
I agree.
he's going to, because to me it's going it's going to be, I don't know what's going to happen, but he's going to rise up and be something. If that makes any sense, but
Definitely.
I think that's such such an important insight. There is so much going on, and I can see why people reread this. I don't reread a lot of stuff, but and this is also the value of discussing with other people. But there really is a lot of layers here, for sure.
It's crazy just how rich the like history and the lore and how it all plays out and influences the characters. I mean, it is just continuously astounding and intriguing as we continue to unravel the mysteries. And we're only at the end of book one. Like, there's so much we don't know.
I just to maybe change the subject a little bit. That last chapter seemed like we were in the Wild West with the horses, and they were pursuing each other. I don't know if people like that kind of thing, but I really, I don't know. I like also just kind of talking about the writing, that there are these sections that are extremely dense, and sometimes it's political maneuvering, but then there are these longer passages where you do get a nice sense of the setting and what's happening, and he's building tension, and there's action, and so this is maybe I'm not going to say I was not liking the book. I was certainly enjoying it, but I really started to really kind of get into it. I'm glad we're moving to more of a weekly setting, or frequency. There was one question I still have that question about the relationship. It's not just the relationship between Serway and Kellis, but it's the relationship with Nayur and Serway, because he clearly is claiming her, right? And there's another word that I wanted to look up. He has put a scar on her that is called a swazand. And I assume that's kind of like branding, but maybe not. Maybe it's scarification. It's probably more of like, because I think he says something like, "You are my tribe now." It's kind of glossed over, but it's another case where it comes up a few times.
I think it's the same kind of scar that the Sylvandi give themselves when they kill. That's why Nayur's hands are filled with scars, because he has killed a lot of people, apparently.
She kills somebody, right?
Yeah.
So she killed someone, so she got a scar for it, because she's now Sylvandi. He's accepted her sort of more than he did before, it sounds like.
Yeah. I guess it's also like you said, Mike, he is now part of his tribe, because that also, it's something we need to realize, like slavery. A lot of the time when there's slavery books, people tend to contextualize it into colonial sort of type of slavery, but this is pre-modern slavery, in which a lot of the time the slaves sort of became part of a community that enslaved them, right? If they were women, they were married off to, the people that they conquered them, or even the slaves were not, it's not chattel slavery. They're not treated well,
You're
right? But there can be a lot of difference. Like the educated slave, like would be Moangus, right? Which can sort of rise a bit in power and influence, and can be important. They're not just like labor.
He says,
The difference in slavery.
no,
Oh, yeah,
no,
go
he
ahead, Mike.
says, I found it. He says, you are my prize, my tribe. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think, yeah, the difference in how slavery is portrayed, I think, is an important thing to highlight, because it is different here, right? We're dealing with a different type of slavery than certainly a lot of Americans think about. And, I think it showed a lot too when Surway's, like, one of the hardest parts for me to read was how the other women treated her.
Mm.
Like it just was horrific. And I mean, her dead baby, like that, she was so excited, and they took that little piece of, joy from her. Her only hope, really, in these bleak circumstances. And it's just, the it goes beyond rivalry. It's, just like toxic competition, and the need to assert themselves, and are arguably, seek their own little power trips, amidst their impotency. um it was hard to read about. It was, her story was just, oh man, one bad thing after another. um
But it
and it
is
is,
interesting how we're seeing a perspective from someone that has no agency, right? Because usually,
yes.
like a character in a book, they always have some sort of agency, right? So that we can identify through them. We can, oh, maybe you can do that, maybe you can do that, something like that. Or even when we read history, we don't read of most of the time people with no agency, right? It gives us a different perspective, especially in a fantasy book. We don't read about, the slaves. We don't, or even if we read about the slaves, it's the slave that rises up, right? The slave that escapes or finds his way somewhere else and has an adventure, right? But up until now, I guess she's having an adventure, not the one I'd like to have. But it is,
Well,
yeah.
she's an
Even
honor.
Esmenet, like Esmenet is maybe you would say a lower rank than Surway, but she still has more agency, right?
100%.
So even
And
though,
no,
yeah,
you're
she's
right.
a whore, she's everything, but she has more power to do something, right? So I don't know.
It's, well, and I think part of it too is perspective, where, like, Esmenet, I think, acknowledges her, she can be hard on herself and her circumstances,
Mm-hmm.
understandably. But I think she also believes she has more agency, particularly over her sexuality. You know, like, even if she's going to be treated poorly, she's like, but I'm going to get paid for this, a lot of the time. Or, like, there's a level of it where she asserts herself into life. And it's like, Surway doesn't even, like, think like that.
Yeah.
you know I mean, that's one of the things that makes her, when she does, like, fight back, so shocking, and I think powerful, is like that she actually is, like, taking charge. But yeah, no, you're totally right, Dan, that I mean, that's the thing that I think is what made it so hard for me, is that she lacks so much agency. But it is certainly something we don't usually read, and it is powerful. I mean, and again, like you said, that it's from her perspective. That's one of the things that, like, I think you could argue again that, like, maybe you could use more female perspectives that aren't defined so much by sexual violence. But I do think that, to, like, it would take an intentional misreading, I feel like, to not acknowledge that he's at least, like, trying to acknowledge, like, these people's humanity, a way, and give them, like, a seat at the table. Like, Surway, it is from her perspective. We see her suffer from her perspective. We don't see it from Kellis's. We see it a little bit from Nair. But a lot of these chapters are from her perspective. And we're watching the story, through her eyes. That's just my 2 cents. Yeah.
I had a question since we talked about Esmenet earlier that I wanted to bring for discussion. We saw the relationship that Esmenet was in at the end of the previous section, which, I guess a lot of us were very unhappy about. And then I feel like Survey is in a very similar situation with Callis. Uh,
Oh,
how do you feel about that? Like, uh, Callis is not really reciprocating her feelings, and he's like using her to get what he wants. It seems like. Which also brings me to the quote that I finally found, which Steve, you had also highlighted. But I will get to that in just a moment. But I think, at least at this point, I don't have evidence to believe that, except for that one quote, that Callis feels anything for Survey. But Survey feels a lot of affection for him. Same with Esmonet and Sarcellus, was that his name? Do we think, like, I don't know, do we have opinions on which relationship is better or worse, or are they just like really two horrible things that we can't rank?
That is really insightful, to highlight the parallel there, because that hadn't occurred to me. But it's the exact same thing, where these men have all the physical power, and they also are actively lying and not being honest about their intentions and their feelings. Both of the men are not. I mean, assuming that Sarcellus is even a man, I mean, who knows? He certainly is presenting in a man's body, but who knows how sex and gender works for whatever the hell he is. But yeah, it is really similar. That hadn't even occurred to me. Great point.
So, since I harped on about it when I made that point, I just want to bring up the quote, which was in Steve's highlights, but I was thinking of a little before what he said. When Kellis, Kellis watched while the Sylvani took her again with her whimpers, like, okay, blah, blah, blah. There was something here he could sense, something outraged. From what darkness had this come? Something is happening to me, father. So that, so given all that went before about how the Dunyan apparently have full control over the origin of their thoughts, if they don't have full control, they can detect and like master anything that comes from the darkness, a quote unquote darkness. This, he's feeling outrage, and this feeling is new to him. So it's indicative of some emotion. Earlier, we decided sort of that he won't feel emotion, or he refuses to feel emotion. Don't know about capability to feel emotion, but this feels like something is awakening, if that makes sense. So that's the only reason why I would even consider maybe for a second that maybe he, if not now, eventually feel something towards Survey. But yeah, what do you guys think? Did you notice that bit, and what did you make of it?
I definitely think that he is being confronted with the possibility of. I mean, I think that was true potentially in the prologue, where like he maybe felt like a little something, but he smothered it basically,
Mm,
and he didn't let that ultimately lead him in what he did and how he acted. And so that's where I don't trust him. Is I'm like, I think he would throw away Survey at the first opportunity if he
mm,
had to, you know. At the same time, I don't think Kellis is like pure evil like these monsters presumably are,
mm.
whatever Sarcellus is.
Yeah, that's true. So, sorry, go ahead,
Oh no.
Mike.
Well, to answer your question, I think it's difficult to say because I part of me thinks that that you know Kellis is still kind of a naive young man. I know that he's like 30 years old or
Mm,
whatever. But he hasn't ventured out into the world very much as far as we know. And I think a lot of us have experienced in our lifetimes where we think, there's this ideal, people get into religion and they get into an exercise regime or whatever, and they think they're going to stick to it. But human nature is such that there's a lot of randomness and things that come up, and so I think maybe he has feelings for her, but that being said, I just don't know. Um, uh, um, it could go any way. It's a good question, but part of me thinks that maybe he's fallible or what have you.
mm,
I am curious if he's ever gonna act out on feelings, like if he is going to lose control of the logos, or if he's always going to hold on to it. Where his arc will go, I definitely, I think there are a lot of possibilities.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did also find it interesting because I did not notice that, and I'm glad you brought it up because I don't think I noticed even in the reread, or I didn't, or just glossed it over it. But it is significant, like to me at least. It is interesting to me, but it might not be interesting to you because you don't have context.
No, it is interesting. I mean, in the context we do have, it's interesting because he has been so unemotional and so lacking in compassion and, even feelings like anger, which anger is a normal human feeling, right? It's like a self-defense mechanism. It's, for us to stand up for ourselves. And it can certainly get out of control and be really unhealthy and damaging, but it's not something he's really expressed before.
Yeah. So up to now, like we've almost finished reading the first book. Who is the hero of the book? Like who's the protagonist of the book for you? I want to ask everyone.
So
Because it's not super obvious.
I'm kind of glad you brought it up because I kind of had a question that I'm not entirely sure I want answered by the rereaders. Is we've met the title of the book, right? The darkness that comes before, and so like, is that just named after the coolest thing in the book, or is it does it actually have a lot of bearing to the story and the rest of it? And similarly, the series is titled Prince of Nothing, so I imagine that a lot of the rest of it is going to center around Kellis, unless it's sort of a theming thing, and then we're going to meet many other people who tend to be Prince of Nothing. For instance, in the prologue, I thought the kid who was left behind after everyone died, he's the Prince of Nothing because like he's a prince, but he's not ruling over anything. And I don't even know if it's mentioned explicitly. I don't think it was in the beginning, but now we've explicitly met the title of the series and the person that it presumably represents at this point. So yeah, anyway, my answer is Kellis to your question, Dan. But
Okay.
Going off what you were saying, Varsha, I mean, you're totally right in the prologue that Kid is the Prince of Nothing, and I mean, so is Kellis as his descendant. Like they're in that way, on a Surimbor line
mhm.
are the princes of nothing. It's an interesting thought, you had that maybe we would meet multiple theoretical, potential Prince of Nothing. I certainly had just assumed it was Kellis,
Mm.
just because he's a prince of a kingdom that doesn't exist anymore. And so in that way, I guess he's the main character. I don't know. I mean, certainly in terms of like the actual protagonist, like, I don't know, emotional investment and like things that have been done. Like I feel more like a Camion fills that role as the one who kind of connects more of the storylines.
Mm.
But that said, I definitely get the vibe. I mean, I went into the series thinking that Kellis was the main character, so I've been shocked he hasn't featured in more of the book. I knew nothing about a Camion, but to me, he kind of felt like I don't know. People define things in different ways, so I struggle. He certainly feels like the most like POV sort of character. Him and arguably Esmenet too, but Akamian we met before her, so I don't know.
Mm.
What are your thoughts, Mike?
Yeah, it's a great question, Dan. I think there's multiple protagonists or potential protagonists in this book. Because when you were asking the question, I was thinking, oh, maybe it's Kellis, maybe it's Akamian, but then we also have Esmenet. We have, well, maybe not Serway really, because we don't know enough about her. She's quite young, but we don't know. So that's why maybe I say she's potential. But then we have those other characters. Well, Nayur. What's his deal? I mean, this is a big question I have. So he's I mean, a big, it's obviously important in writing is what's the character's motivation or what do they want. So what he wants, I this is very basic. Maybe I just missed something, but what he wants is just to kill Wangus. I mean, I think he wants more than that because he's disgraced. He's kind of he's lost everything. So I think it's more than that, but we don't really know enough about him. But then he's formed this relationship with Kellis, and Kellis is what he wants is not clear really to me. And it's not. Is that a protagonist? It's somebody that wants to. He also wants to kill his father, right? I had to go back to that. I was like, is that really what he wanted? Because there is a page where they're both have the same desire or whatever. Maybe that's not answering your question or whatnot, but I keep thinking about their motivation and what's driving them. It's not necessarily good per se. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a difficult.
Why does Carlos want to kill his father? Why do you think he wants?
His father?
Yes.
Well, he said he wants to kill his father.
Yeah, see, that's what he said to Nair. But when we were in his head in the prologue, that's not what he said. He certainly had negative feelings about his father, but I don't remember him ever explicitly thinking, I'm going to kill Moingus. He was going to his dad. He wanted to find him and confront him and figure out why he left. But I don't remember him ever explicitly thinking, oh, I'm going to kill my dad. Until, well, he didn't think it. That's what he said to Nair, which I read as him manipulating Nair, essentially being, I want your help, maybe need your help to go find my dad. So let's go. And that was the way to twist his arm, per se. But I don't know. I mean, I certainly could see him killing his dad.
So I guess my point is really like, what is he doing that we are, as the reader, getting behind? He's an interesting character. There's just a lot of buildup. The world is being constructed. So it's just a difficult question to answer. And maybe this is one of those books where there really isn't one clear protagonist, and I'm totally okay with that.
What you're saying there, Mike, is why I feel, at least in this book, that Akamian is the protagonist of the book, because he's the one with a specific goal who the audience at least can relate to more, who is in a lot of the book, who connects a lot of the stories, and he's clearly tied to like what is one of the major, if not the major, through lines of the story, which is, the potential second apocalypse, right? Which I guess is the name of the second series. So maybe we don't even get to it here. I don't know, but it's like clearly a major thing, right? Because we're dealing with all of these hidden undercover monsters that are like the through line so far, alongside the Holy War. So I don't know. It's interesting. We haven't seen more perspectives. Like one of our main perspectives isn't from someone like actively fighting the Holy War. I mean, I guess Confus is kind of that now, but he isn't like, I guess I just expected someone, if you were to look at the history, to be like one of the like Frankish princes, who like led the First Crusade. But we haven't really, Nercy Proyas, I guess, kind of, but he hasn't been like a major character. So I that was something that certainly was surprising to me, is the Holy War almost feels like it's important. I mean, it's like the kind of the main plot in a way, but it also kind of feels like a backdrop to a larger evil, kind of in the same way that like in A Song of Ice and Fire, you have the others, the White Walkers, and then the actual Game of Thrones. I don't know.
Yeah. If I had to pick somebody, it would be Akamian. Definitely.
That makes sense. I do remember the first time I read it, by this point I was like, oh, I want Kellis to fail. He's my enemy. Oh. That's how I was. But I've read many people that were reading this book that were like, he's the protagonist, right? Like he's the... I read different opinions. That's why I was wondering what you guys thought.
So for me, I don't know if this is the right way to think about it. A protagonist is sort of like the most important character, or the one that we center the story around, not necessarily someone we need to agree with. Um, which is why I think Kellis. But yeah, I agree that Kamian is the most likable.
Hmm.
It doesn't feel to me like it's a Kamian story, though. He's more of a, uh, especially based on the epigraphs and stuff. He's just a witness to the passing of history, which isn't actually centered around him. It has potential to be centered around Kellis, possibly Moengus. Um,
I agree with you. I think it depends on how we're defining protagonist,
mm,
right? Like if I had to name a main character, I would say Kellis.
mm,
Like Kellis gives me main character vibes. But in terms of like, I mean, I don't know, because I guess you could say Akamian doesn't even really drive a lot of the story, which is what I think of a protagonist doing, as driving the story.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't know. It's definitely a strong ensemble. I mean, one way or another, whether you
yeah.
can name a protagonist, like it's not something where, it's really only about, it's not Name of the Wind, where it's really about just this one guy's story. It's definitely telling a story about the world, I feel
Yeah.
like.
I think we are. It's not any one person's story. We are reading the stories of Esmanet and Survey and Confis and who's this guy. For some of them, it's some perspective into events, like a person's perspective of an event that happened. For the others, it's their story or arc, if that makes sense. Like I feel like it's a mix of multiple things, but yeah. Uh, we talked about Callus's motivations to kill his father. So I have a few things there that I feel like are uncertain, or like we're feeling that we're maybe being misdirected about by the characters, but I don't necessarily have evidence to back it up. So the fact that Callus is convinced that he's going to find Moengus in Shime, but all we know he knows so far about how to find Moengus is that there are these images of the holy war that's going, but like that's fine because that's going to end in Shime. Why is that equal to we're going to find him in Shime? Maybe, okay, new theory, Maithanet is Moengus.
Well, Moingus did say come to Shime, like he in the prologue.
Mm,
So I mean, I think that's why he's going to Shime.
that's
Beyond
true.
that,
Yeah. So he sent
uh,
him dreams of a holy war and asked him to go to Shime. But yeah, maybe that's not where he currently is. Maybe that's where he's going to end up. There's one other thing
totally,
that I
yeah.
had a question about. Oh crap, I forget. But yeah, I also agree with you guys that I don't necessarily believe that he wants to kill his father, or that if he does, there are some conditions for when he would kill him that he's not telling Nair. Like maybe it's if these conditions are true, I'm going to kill him, but he's just telling Nair as if it's a given truth that when he meets his father, he's going to kill him.
Yeah, that's one of the big uh, Nair mess ups that he took him at his word for that, seemingly, and um, he's definitely still being manipulated. He's shown to be more. Uh, he pushes back more than maybe most people would, but I do think Nair is still unwittingly being directed,
Mm.
even if he is actively trying to fight it. Just because Callus knows how to push his buttons.
Yeah. I mean, if you know you're manipulated, maybe like, he knows he's manipulated, but how, he doesn't know how. Or maybe you're being manipulated into thinking that you're being manipulated, right?
Yeah, there's a
So, which
recursive
is,
cycle there.
how deep
That's
does
true.
it go?
How deep does it go?
Is it
To
a
the
double
darkness
bluff?
that comes before, apparently. You know?
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
gotta acknowledge the darkness.
Goes all the way to the dark.
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, but in a lot of, I think something that you need to think about when you're
Mm,
thinking about a relationship between characters and motivations. A lot of the time, it's not just one thing. right? It's just like about the feelings of characters. They don't just feel one thing; they feel a lot of things. And sometimes they're contradicting, sometimes they don't know why, and they mix in weird and intricate ways. So there's always one more layer that you didn't think about a lot of the time.
There's definitely a lot, driving these characters.
Yeah, I think surveys. Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No. You, please. I want to hear what you have to say.
Oh, I was saying, I think surveys relationship to Callus and Nayur, that's a great example of the complexity you mentioned, right? Like, she's willfully ignoring the fact that Callus killed people. She's trying desperately to not like Nayur, and when he's the only protector she has, she finds herself feeling happy around him. So, like, there's a lot of complexity there that I thought was really well done with her relationship with the two men she's traveling with.
The most messed up love triangle.
Yeah, there's two love triangles though.
That's true.
So that was the other thing I was going to say when you were mentioning it, Varsha. It's not there's multiple parallels going on with the women and the relationships. So I don't. I mean it's still, we don't know much about it, but there is definitely. I wanted to go back because when I thought I read something about that Nayur was sleeping with. Gosh, now I'm blanking on her name. Serway?
Serway?
Yeah. Thank you. My brain doesn't function this time of day, but thank you. Yes. But then this kind of ownership thing or whatever. But maybe I'm just reading into it, but there is certainly something going on. And then obviously with Esmenet and then Akamian and the thing they call whatever, forgot his name.
Sarcellis.
Yeah. Not just that, but we also have another triangle of two men and one woman in the imperial family.
Yeah.
Yep.
Slightly different dynamic, but another two men, one woman,
Grandma.
Weird sexual vibes going.
We're talking about grandma, right?
Yeah,
totally.
Who molested her son? There and maybe the grandson. I don't know. That's unclear. Yeah. No, but to go off what you were saying, Mike. Yeah, no, like the baby. I mean, genetically has to be Nair's because Nair's like raped her repeatedly. But that's what she was thinking. Is like she wants it to be. Kellis's, but Kellis hasn't slept. He never did, right? Like that.
I mean, that part was just, it didn't seem like it, but that's what I think he thinks. Well, at some point they're reading each other's thoughts, so. But I didn't realize, Carl, that was what I maybe it wasn't as clear to me, but that's what I thought. That I guess he was raping her. I certainly assumed that, but so that's what my assumption was, that was Nair's child.
Yes.
But it is a good point. Like, because you said before, we have multiple love triangles. Are any of these relationships, do they have love? Any of them?
Well,
maybe some of them. Which one are to possession? Which one is admiration? I mean, can there be love if you have such different social positions of power, and it's like, is it only lust? Are they using each other? I don't know.
Okay, so that's getting into certainly philosophical questions about what is love and how are you defining love, right? I personally think Akamian and Esmenet definitely love each other. I don't think what they have is healthy at all. It's not like a pure, Disney fairy tale true love thing, but I think they definitely are physically and emotionally and mentally attracted to one another, and have a deep bond. Again, I don't think it's healthy, but I strangely, it's the most wholesome, man-woman relationship we have in the whole story so far. So I'm support it in that way. I
Come on,
guess. I don't know.
the grandma's relationship with the emperors. It's it's so Disney-like.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
That's a bad joke.
But I mean, to be honest, like, we have so many different
That was
types that
super
some people could put the, oh, this is love and this is not love boundary in different places between a lot of these different relationships, right? And maybe there's a bit of it mixed in all of them. I don't know. Like, it's not as simple as just, oh, this is and this isn't. Maybe it's a bit of that and a bit of something else, right?
Going back to the non-men epigraph, right? We are the lovers, right?
But what does it mean?
Yeah.
What do they love?
Themselves.
Yeah. I mean, could go back to the darkness that comes before. Everything goes back to the darkness that comes before. That's my answer to every question now. It's just all what's going on here? What's the darkness that comes before? Acting up again. Can't trust that darkness that comes before.
Yeah.
Mischievous little scamp, that darkness.
So I only have one other question from my side that I was just curious. At the very end of the last chapter, I just wanted to clarify. So we've learned now that the crew of the three people have run into the Holy War, but who is the guy that they meet? Is that Zemanus? Because I think he has the same first name. Krijat. Oh gosh, yeah, I did write it down, but I won't pretend to pronounce it.
Give it a shot. Try to pronounce it.
Krijates, maybe. And so I was just curious but I know that maybe that'll get answered. I don't know if it'll get answered immediately, but isn't that what they were also kind of looking for? But I don't know if they're falling into the wrong hands but I was just wondering if that's the same guy from the previous part, that Zemanus guy. Maybe I misunderstood.
The Krijates Erisis isn't. He's been mentioned though. He's one of the, I don't know, the lords leading. There are a lot of names thrown at us that aren't necessarily developed that much.
Okay.
I'm now questioning. I'm like, was he in the Vulgar Holy War? Did he survive that, or is this guy separate from that and is coming later? I don't. He's definitely been mentioned. He's one of the leading commanders. He's like a lord of some kind, maybe even a prince. But he's
so that's the same first name as Zenamus, who is the friend of Acamian, but maybe it's a common name. That's what I was wondering.
Which is the
Krijates.
Yeah, however.
Is that a common name? Do you have a lot of friends called Krijates?
Like John.
Or
Dan. Or Mike. Mike's so common.
Maybe it's like an Asian thing where it's the first name, it's in a different order. Maybe it's like a household name is what I'm getting at. I don't know.
It's possible.
I don't know. That's interesting. Sorry, I hadn't noticed the Krijates thing. Sorry. Go ahead, Varsha.
Oh no, I was going to start a new topic if that's okay. So I think at some point, I don't remember, during the backstory, we've been hearing from Nayur how war is intellect, or maybe it was Confis who said that.
Yeah.
And then on page 352 in this edition of the book, the paperback, it says, Nayur's thoughts stumbled both in shock and in affirmation. Then he recoiled in sudden suspicion. This man is intellect. War. So we've reversed that from war is intellect to intellect is war, almost. What did you think of that? I mean, I don't really have any conclusions from it. I just thought that was an interesting reversal. I feel like the author has something to say there, but I don't quite know what.
I think it's a smart observation. That's what I think.
Yeah,
But
I
it
don't
is
know.
also interesting to see how he reuses topics, right?
Mm,
He, in very much the same way as, maybe a fable or the Bible or something like that, where you have a lesson and then you sort of it interprets the lesson to lead to the next lesson,
mm,
and you revisit the same themes, but each time you revisit them, they're slightly different, and you're learning a bit more, and it's making you
mm,
think a bit something more, right?
mm. Yeah, that makes sense. I like that. I believe this was in the context of Kellis because he's starting to think about war as intellect at this point. But
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, it's almost like he's waging war on him through intellect, but that's the best I have from it. I don't even know if that makes sense.
No, yeah, I think that's a wise reading of it. I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out what's up with this Irisis dude. Because he's definitely been mentioned. He wasn't vulgar holy war. I think he was one of the latecomers.
Hmm.
Um, I cannot find his name in the
Crititas.
glossary.
Oh. Yeah, the
I
glossary
know.
has
Cool.
only like five people.
Kijoras, what's his name?
Mm.
Siemus?
Yeah, that guy.
No, not Zim. The other one they met
Nothing.
at the end. Unless that is the
Oh,
dude.
I
I mean, I don't
I
know.
don't know.
He didn't.
Yeah.
We definitely have seen that name before. I mean, that was one of the lords leading the holy war, but I just don't remember what faction, what his deal was, if we even know.
hmm.
You know how there's such a proliferation of words starting with S? I feel like in this series it's K. There's so many names that start with K. They all
There are a lot of
blend into
days.
each other.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably on purpose, right? He probably assumed, like, oh, this. He took a real life language and he sort of based the phonetics on some of them. I mean, if you want, you can go to the appendix and just look at the. That's not a spoiler, but you can look at. There's a graph showing all the different languages and who they evolved from. Uh, so there's probably some ancient language that he took and he based the initial one and they sort of did a bit of that. That's what I would assume.
That
And
makes
it's
sense.
also it's another, maybe it's a homage to Tolkien, right? Because Tolkien started by writing the languages and then he wrote the culture around it.
Wow.
But yeah.
Could be.
Yeah, I looked up
I,
Krijatis and it does seem like Cinemus. It's his first name or last name, depending on how we're supposed to read this, but we were looking for. Sorry, Carl, you were saying.
so, I'm no. While we're talking about that, so is it the name of like a family name, or is it just like Chris? Like, is he just like, you have Chris Ximenes and then Chris Irasis or whatever the name is, or is it, because that makes a big difference in how we're supposed to read that, right? Like if we're supposed to be like, oh, they just happen, they're both like Henrys,
Hmm.
for example, for like, a historical name, or is it, they're both, I don't know, Plantagenet is the name that comes to mind, right? Like
Hmm.
what's the tie here? It probably is just a first name.
Mm.
Now that we're talking about it, it probably is just like Henry or, Philip or something. I don't know.
Yeah. If it's the family name, wouldn't Proyas also have the same family name? Mm.
If they're the same,
They're not. They're.
I don't know
yeah,
what
yeah,
type
you
of
probably,
uncle he is.
I think they're different
that's
ethnic
something.
groups or what have you. Different cultures.
I definitely do feel like, I mean, it's intentional, right? He just kind of like throws you in it, and like I can definitely follow most of the story, but some of the politics of like where people are from and exactly how they relate, like if it's not in a place we visited, I have no idea. Like
I
I could not tell you anything like where Nursey Proyas is. I off the top of my head could not begin to guess, even though I'm sure it's mentioned, just because we just haven't been
yeah.
grounded in those like places and cultures.
One thing that
Yeah.
somebody mentioned earlier that I keep thinking about is there's a couple characters that we don't know. We know the characters, but we don't know where they fit in the world, really. Like, or I think in the case of the Skilvendi, they're not part of that religious group. They're their own religious group, I think. Similarly, with I think the two women, they're from they're from some other culture that we don't really know much about. So there's a lot of questions about. We know a lot about the characters, but we don't know as much about like where they're from or their history. Not that I need to know all of that. However, we do know a lot more about like Akamian and some of these other characters and where they fit in the world, and so there's still a lot of questions about where some of these people are coming from, because that seems to be really important. But we don't. There's still like mystery about where they fit, like are they like is it are the Skilvendi like some like a completely outside of this the Phanem or the Inrithi? I think they are.
Yeah, I think they're their own thing. I think they're like. I mean, I don't even know what to compare them to historically, but like
the Mongols, the Huns, the
is that what they're supposed to be like? Okay.
Yeah, they're the nomadic horse people that live the steppe outside of civilization and attack civilization, right?
Right.
So they are that sort of external barbaric force, which is sometimes unstoppable, right? Always threatening society.
Are we supposed? I mean, are we just supposed to read them as that archetype, or is there a specific historical example? I guess is what I was curious about, because like
I think you're supposed to read them as that, like, right? It's if they are that, I'm not going to tell you, but that's how you're supposed to read them. Like that's what they're
the barbarian, right? The nomadic.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm asking is like, are they supposed to parallel specific real world? Like one specific real world ethnic group.
I mean, the thing is that a lot of these nomadic societies, like Turks, Mongols, Huns, etc., they're all very, I don't want to say unchanged, but they have a lot of similarities, even for like thousands and thousands of years, right? The same guys that the British fought in Afghanistan were not, that far dissimilar from the guys that fell down and fought the Roman Empire in early hundreds BC, right? So it's that sort of society. I think it's a mix of all of them, right?
Okay, that's what I'm asking is because it's like the I guess my view of them would be slightly different if they were supposed to like map on to a specific culture in the same way that I off the top of my head, I don't even know what to compare it to, but but if they just are embodying that sort of like archetype of a culture, I think, which is how I had been reading them. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to, because like just knowing where history goes, I wasn't sure if I was supposed to like view them more as like, more Turks or more Mongols, just because, with the history of the Crusades, they embody different roles, right? And in fact, the Turks and the Mongols fought. So that's the only reason I was asking, is like the history nerd in me was like, am I supposed to like see a specific like historical relationship here to like just look at, or is it just kind of embodying that kind of cultural archetype?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, I think by that point, by the Crusade point, the Byzantines were only like the Turks would have been the closest thing to that, but the Turks were much more settled by that point. They're not, the nomadic horse archers anymore, really.
And they were Muslim too, so that it would have lined in more with the font. I always mix this up. Is the Phanim the religion, or is that the empire?
I think it's religion.
Cayenne is.
I think.
Yeah,
Phanim is religion, right? Okay, yeah. However, it's
they're an upstart faith.
An upstart faith. So Steve, we didn't hear from you after that 40-minute break. Did you have any other things to add? Any other favorite bits to discuss?
I just have one question for everyone, and Dan already knows this, but why do you think Callus didn't kill Nair when he had the chance? Do you think he really needs him, or do you think there's something else going on?
Good question.
I guess how I had rationalized it was that, one, he needs to continue to learn things about the outside world that he doesn't know, and Nair seemingly knows a lot. And the other is that, two heads are better than one, or in this case, two swords are better than one, that he'd be in less danger with, a real tough warrior like Nair. But beyond that, yeah, I don't know if there's a deeper sort of plan. That certainly was something I've wondered.
But isn't he also a liability because he knows a lot about him, right? Seems pretty dangerous move.
He's definitely a liability, yeah. When I think of Nair, liability is one of the first words that comes to mind.
That brings me to a question I forgot to ask or bring up for discussion. Why do the Dunyan have to stay secret? What would happen if the world found out about their existence? And is it something you train for or something you're born with? It sounds like it seems to me that it could be something you're trained for, because the prince who was left behind in the prologue wasn't Dunyan. But his descendants, I think his descendants, um, apparently are. So that could also be because of interracial coupling or whatever. So anyway, why do they need to stay secret? Why is the mission that the Dunyan need to stay secret?
I don't know. That's something I've wondered too. Mike, what are your thoughts on all this?
To answer Steve's question, I think this may be a theory. I think there's something going on with Moingus and his connection to Nair. Why on earth, or why in the hell would Moingus connect himself with Nair 30 years ago? There's a reason. These people don't just do random stuff. We've learned. And we don't necessarily trust Kellis. So I think they obviously need him for some reason that is totally unclear to us. So it's an excellent question, Steve. I think it's not the basic what's mentioned, which is like, I think maybe he does need him. That's what they say. That's what Kellis, I think, says or thinks. But there's something else going on there, because why would Moingus associate himself, or I'm foggy on the origin now, but he didn't just drop out of thin air. He placed himself with that cult, that society, that family, and manipulated Sciotha. Sorry for going on and on. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say he was enslaved. I agree with you. I think he placed himself there.
Yeah,
I agree. We don't know that for a fact, is all I'm saying. It is not because we haven't seen Moingus, we don't know what his plan was. But I agree with you, Mike, 1,000% that Moingus had to do that intentionally. There's no way that one of the Dunyan, like as powerful as they are, seemingly just like random happenstance ended up there and then doing the things he did. Like, I think there's a greater plan at play. I have no idea what it is. If I had to guess, probably has something to do with the second apocalypse. Yeah. But beyond that, I couldn't even begin. I don't know. I'm right there with you, though.
I love looking at the expressions of the rereaders.
trying
There's so
to
many things which are like, I'm like, oh, that's such a smart observation. And so many things, oh, he's so wrong. Right? It's very jumpy between them. It's rarely in the middle.
Yeah, we might. Yeah, no, that's what makes it really fun.
Absolutely. That's the best part of this stuff. Yeah.
So,
What was your question again, Varsha? I don't even remember. What
let me see. It was, yeah, why did the Dunya need to stay secret? Why is that Kellis's mission? Or is he lying about it? Or also, to answer Steve's question, was do we think there's an element of Kellis lying to himself about why he needs Nayur? Like he just needs him for human reasons, for companionship, and like he doesn't want to admit it. So he's like, "Ah, he's gonna help me kill my father for whatever purpose." So
that's an interesting idea.
I have absolutely no belief in that theory, but I'm like, that would be a fun one if it's true.
Well, it could be. It may not even be the like emotional human reasons. It could even be like he needs to know more about his father.
Mm,
Um, I mean, or maybe it's both, right? Like maybe it's like he's like Machiavellian. I need to know as much about my father as possible so I'm best prepared to confront him, while also feeling, a son's drive to understand his father. I mean, that's like one of the most basic human things, right? Is for a child to want to understand their parents,
yeah.
particularly as an adult. And Kellis, as naive as he is an adult, and so I'm sure he spent his entire life wondering like why
Mm,
why. I mean, he did, because he left and he's like, I want to know why my dad left, like what's going on there.
yeah.
uh,
Yeah. See, that's really interesting because like I I'm torn about attaching these very human emotions to Kellis because I feel like I really believe him when he says that I feel no emotion. And so but we could have these humanish explanations for a lot of things he does, which
I agree with you 100%. I always hesitate to, but it's certainly possible. I mean, at the end of the day, he's still human. So far as we know, he's still like totally human.
different kind.
So
Yeah.
he's going to be imperfect.
Yeah.
Did, going back to
Anything? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
your question, Varsha,
Mhm.
why are the Dunyain secret? I think the answer is probably in the prologue, somewhat. But I feel kind of far removed from it. But I think it has something to do with the fact that they're maintaining some, this secret society, so that they I don't know if they're, whatever insight that they have, if it gets out to the general population, there may be some repeat of the of problems in the past or something. I assume.
Mm.
But it's it's difficult to answer the question. But I keep thinking, and again, I could be way off, but I keep thinking that they serve a purpose where when the world is out of joint, if you will, they have these emissaries and there's maybe more than just the two that we know of that are.
So like the Astari in Lord of the Rings, right? That's the Gandalf, the wizards
Yeah, exactly.
sent out to go like fix
I
problems.
think there's other examples too, but they're like, they're fixers. Could be.
That's interesting. We do know that they were refugees, right? Do we know? I can't remember if it's explicitly said it or if I just made this assumption that they were made refugees by the apocalypse, by the side of the strong. But I guess it theoretically, if it doesn't explicitly say it, which I'm too lazy to check right now. I mean, I would have to look through the whole prologue. It could be humans even, right? Like maybe they're even just running from prejudice. Like, I can imagine humanity would not respond really well to people who are these like emotionless monks who think they're better than everyone else. Like I could definitely see that leading to, religious ethnic violence. So maybe maybe it comes down to that, and they're just like, well, we're not going to go out again. I don't know. Yeah, it's a really interesting question, Varsha, that I'm sure is important to how everything will play out. On a similar sort of big picture, but less honestly related. Although I don't know, I feel like we talk so much about religion with the series that do you guys think there's an like explicit afterlife? Like really what I'm wondering is do you think there's a hell or multiple hells? That's something I've wondered is like, that is a very big sort of hook, for religions, right? Is like the fear of going to hell. And, do we think that that is something that is like, I mean, because for all we know, the strong, right, are like literally just like demons out of hell. Like they seemingly are like pure evil. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are. Obviously, the rereaders know the answer, I'm sure, one way or another. Um, more
Or do
about
we?
how things work. But what are your guys' thoughts?
That is interesting because uh, a lot of religion, I have come to realize the primary motivator for all the, let's say, prescriptions that are laid out in religion are for what will happen in the afterlife. And we haven't really encountered the notion of an afterlife here in this book with regards to any of the gods, or at least none that I've noticed so far. So that is an interesting question. Like, what are they fighting for? Are they just doing, like, some of the characters are presumably doing what they think is the will of their god. I think Proyas was one of them, if I remember correctly. Um, but yeah, like, what is the reward they seek? That is a really good question. I don't know that I have an answer. Uh, the reward is usually a heavenly afterlife in some of these instances, but is that what it is in this world? Yeah, that's a
I
great
mean,
question.
to add to that, and also to think about extra stuff, like we also know that the sorcerers are supposed to be damned too, right?
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So there
Right.
is talk about damnation,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? But we also, I don't think we seen anything which can be directly correlated to a god or something like that. I mean, magic is a thing, but I don't think we've seen anything supernatural religious wise, right? So it seems very sort of set in like, you know, oh, these people fighting because they think their god is the real one and they're all killing each other, but there's no real god or something like that, right? It's very set like that, isn't it?
Mm. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think it depends on how you interpret it all, right? Like is the no god, for example, a deity. I certainly interpreted him again as like a Sauron sort of great dark wizard type, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if there's been evidence of supernatural, I guess you could say, or not. How does magic work?
When when was this? When Inrao was meeting his fate, he was talking about, I forget. There were these polytheist elements, or I forget what he
Yeah.
was talking about, that existed, that maybe still exist, but the tusk has is unifying them in some way.
Mm.
The Thousand
Right,
Temples,
under
yeah.
the Thousand Temples, I guess. But yeah, I think there's a lot of unknown there. I wonder if I actually I don't know why I keep thinking about. So this is a world where an apocalypse has existed, or if not many people believe it. We actually have these kinds of things on Earth. Like there was this volcano in Indonesia that
Absolutely.
wiped out almost the entire planet, or entire population of humans that we know of. There's also the meteor. There's all kinds of things that have actually happened that cause mass extinctions, things like that. But I feel like for the for Akamian's people, not the Citadel, but something.
The
Thank
mandate.
you. The mandate. They have memory of this actually happening, whereas everybody else is like, you guys are nuts. But for them, that's hell, I guess. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's not a good answer, but I keep thinking like, that's I don't think we know enough about that. Whether there is a afterlife or what have you, but I would say probably we just maybe haven't. It hasn't really come up that much.
Have they described? They must have described. I just don't remember. I'm overwhelmed by all of the threats of damnation and murder and things. Have they talked about like a heaven analog, like a paradise sort of like? They must have, right? Like, but I can't remember off the top of my head someone mentioning like this is your reward, because like you said, Varsha, like that's the whole. It's the carrot, right? It's the carrot and the stick is the afterlife, question, right? And I only remember like some mention of the stick. I don't remember if they talked about the carrot or not. Is that even part of their religion, or like what do they think happens if you're good and you die?
Yeah. And even the stick is kind of ambiguous, right? Like, what does damnation mean? Like, is it just your God doesn't protect you while you're alive, or is it, something bad happens to you after you die?
Well, right. If you're tortured for all of eternity. Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Their beliefs, I don't know if that's been spelled out yet for us.
I haven't noticed it. I can't say for a fact that it hasn't come up. But I agree with you, Mike. Like, I also did think of the dreams that the mandate schoolmen have when Carl asked that question. I'm like, that does feel like someone's personal hell, but not necessarily an afterlife.
I would definitely not want to have that.
Sounds awful.
That would be horrible. Every time you go to sleep, you're going to dream of the worst thing that's ever happened in history. Like, just think about it. Like, they're horrible. But that's the Prince of Nothing.
Yep.
Which parts, I don't remember, which parts do they dream of? It's the battle, right?
The wizard's memory. We've only seen a battle, but theoretically, I mean, I interpret it as theoretically, it's all of the wizard's memories relating to the apocalypse. So we've only seen the battle because I think that's the scary thing. But
also the consult, they have knowledge of the consult as well. That everybody's like, well, they don't exist. This not a big. It's like boogeymen type of thing, which we know they exist. And they come in weird shapes, and there's like shapeshifters, I guess.
Yeah.
I thought that came up in this section as well, where I thought that this was somebody a shapeshifter, but now I don't remember. Maybe I'm confusing it, but
there was question of whether or not Kellis was a sorcerer. But anyway, we've been going for a little over 2 hours. I thought we might want to wrap it up, and it's pretty late for Mike. Does anyone have anything else that we should discuss, or are we ready to call it a night? So we could do outros, I guess. Steve, maybe you can start and we can go counterclockwise. Yeah.
Yeah, this is what's fun about this book is we can go on and on and on for hours. It's pretty insane. But yeah, you can find me at pagechewing.com. Best way to find me. Join our forums.
Counterclockwise, is that me?
Yes.
That's you.
Yeah, I'm also can also be found on Page Chewing as well. Dan, you're next.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I could even just read one chapter and then discuss an hour one chapter or even more, because there's so many themes and topics which are interesting to discuss. But yeah. Anyways, if anyone wants to discuss them with me on the Patreon forum, you can find me there, DNFire17. I might not respond because I'm on vacation, but at some point I might.
Yeah, please join the Patreon forum so you can laugh at all of our silly theories. That we will inevitably be wrong, but when we're right, oh man, I'm gonna do a happy dance. I'm still doing the happy dance actually about the Skilvindi. I like the weird whatever. It's not fully defined yet, but whatever the relationship is to the consult and that whole dark side. Anyway, you can find me, Carl D. Albert, at on the Patreon forum, of course, and then my username and most social media is at Carl D. Albert. And you can find my book Truth of Crowns on Amazon, probably is the best place, but wherever books are sold for print copies.
Nice.
And we're reading it right now. Yeah, I'm going to plug it right now since we're talking. I normally let someone else do because I don't like to talk about it too much, but we are going to have a little chat about it next month sometime. So TBD.
Yeah, I'm about 50 pages in. It's been really interesting so far. I'm looking forward to the discussion early next month or maybe mid next month. We'll see. But yeah, you can find me on the YouTube channel Reading by the Rainy Mountain. Yeah, and I hang out on the Patreon forum all the time. So we'll see everyone a week from now, talking about the final part of this book, just part 5, whatever chapters are remaining. We'll be doing the finale discussion for the book. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye.